When I come up with an idea, I usually ask myself, why am I doing this? Why me? Why like this? Why now? And if in pursuing these ideas, it leads me to greater excitement about it and a viability of the project, then I'll go ahead and build the model or paint the painting or make the whatever creative thing I have in mind. So this video here is a compilation of all the info that informed the model build of my factory stock Millennium Falcon. It's not meant to be a comprehensive video or compilation of Millennium Falcon facts or documents or history. It's just the things that I used for my project. You can skip ahead and go to the build video, but I had to do it. I had to put it down there. This is my documentation. If you ask, why did I do it like this? Why not like that? This is why. In 2015, after I had gotten back into scale modeling after a hiatus of about 20 years, I was kind of itching to do the Millennium Falcon, even though I said when I got back into it that I would not do the Millennium Falcon. Everybody's doing the Millennium Falcon. Everybody's doing a screen accurate Millennium Falcon, and everybody's doing an excellent Millennium Falcon. I didn't want to do one more Millennium Falcon. And then I had the idea to take it back to its beginnings, to do a factory fresh Millennium Falcon. So I looked online, I looked at some pictures. I couldn't find a lot of pictures that I thought were what it, should be like. And I'm saying should subjectively. So the approach I took was to limit my research to materials that I could have obtained from 1977 to 1983. So anything that came out around the time the movie Star Wars came out in 77, the Han Solo books, the Lando books, which were released in 1983, any kind of things that I could have gotten my hands on, blueprints, whatever, interviews, sketches, anything that I could use to revert the current Millennium Falcon to its days when it was shiny and new, in the actual factory showroom. I'll be explaining specific excerpts from those materials, including the movies, when I get down to it later on. When I came up with this idea, or had the idea to do this myself, the Han Solo movie had just been announced. So I thought, okay, I better do it now, because I want to do it with my own ideas before the movie establishes whatever it would establish on screen. Now, I have seen online a couple of models of the YT-1300 freighter built by some people, and I've seen some CGI models, but I'm going to ignore those. I'm going to ignore the Haynes manual, and I'm going to build this to my own specifications the way I would have logically interpreted it from the standpoint of only having those 6 years of materials and references to draw from, including the movies. Now, not all of my research is relevant, but it is interesting, and some of it informs the character of the Falcon, the computer with its strange dialect, for example. And part of my overall intent is to gather as much official information as possible. And there's nothing more official than the movies, beginning with the first time we hear the name Millennium Falcon is when Han Solo introduces himself as the captain of it. Luke and Ben are trying to arrange passage to Alderaan, if it's a fast ship. And Han says, "Fast ship? You've never heard of the Millennium Falcon?" And Ben says, "Should I have?" And then Han brags about the Kessel Run, and Ben looks skeptical. And then Han brags some more, and now Luke and Ben look skeptical. And then Han says, "She's fast enough for you, old man." And then later in Docking Bay 94, we finally get a look at the Millennium Falcon, and it doesn't impress Luke. He calls it a piece of junk. And Han points out that she'll make 0.5 past light speed, and that she may not look like much, but she's got it where it counts, kid. I've made a lot of special modifications myself. Now, I quoted that verbatim because that's sort of the crux of this build in the Millennium Falcon itself. So the cockpit has 4 seats. Han Solo is on the front left, pilot. Chewie is on the front right, co-pilot. And there's 2 in the back. I guess they're navigator and communications. In the second solo book by Brian Daly, he backs up this notion that there's a communication seat and a navigator seat. And there are 2 extra crew members in the cockpit present in Return of the Jedi when Lando's flying the Falcon. But in Star Wars, Han is reaching back to the navigator position, flicking a couple of switches before they get underway, because there's only him and Chewie on board. And then in the next movie, we meet Lando Calrissian, who used to own the Millennium Falcon until he lost her to Han Solo fair and square. Was it a bet? Was it a game? They don't say in the movies, I know. And then he tells them that the ship saved his life quite a few times, and that she's the fastest hunk of junk in the galaxy, implying, of course, that she looked very similar when he owned the Falcon. Kind of junky on the outside, but really fast. I just adore these shots of the Falcon on the platforms on Cloud City. They're just perfect. And then we come to the last Star Wars film. There's not much new to be learned about the Millennium Falcon in Return of the Jedi itself, other than the fact that there are those extra 2 crew members behind Lando and that co-pilot of his, implying that there would normally be 4 crew members on a freighter like this. Maybe 6 if the gun turrets are standard, I don't know. And aside from Solo's remark about special modifications, about which we can infer refers to the extreme piping, the greeblies, and open sections of the ship, inside and out, there's little else in the movies themselves to let us know just how much was original to the ship and how much was added later. That it looks like a piece of junk to Luke, that Leia asks skeptically, "You came in that thing?" And that Lando refers to it as the fastest hunk of junk in the galaxy, could refer to its age or appearance or both. From the movies alone, we don't know how old the ship is, who, if anyone, had it before Lando, and what exactly where and who did the modifications. And it doesn't matter to me, since I'm not telling the story of the Millennium Falcon. I'm just trying to imagine what it looked like right before its owner bought it. So all the technical jargon about how the engine works, how hyperdrive works, not relevant, just appearances. Now I'm going to delve into a few resources beyond the movies, starting with Sculpting a Galaxy by Lauren Peterson. Now this came out quite recently compared to the movies, but let's pretend you could interview Lauren Peterson about the Millennium Falcon and he might have this to say, and I quote, "At one time the Falcon's cockpit was to be motorized so that it could rotate 90 degrees. Lucas had the idea the ship would fly like a sunfish, landing flat, but at takeoff the body would rotate and the cockpit would remain in the same configuration. Though the end model did not include this feature, the cockpit remained sleeved and could be rotated." Now I've got my little mini Millennium Falcon model, and I've rotated the cockpit so that I can do a little diorama of it actually pushing some cargo. And this is backed up by Joe Johnston in The Making of Star Wars by J.W. Rindler, and I quote, "We justified the mandibles by saying they could be a freight loading area where your cargo goes in. Something comes out and grabs the freight and takes it back into the ship. Now, I didn't include this feature in my little mini diorama. I just have the mandibles gripping the cargo like mandibles, like jaws." Johnston also had a video on his YouTube channel which he discussed plans for the Falcon flying vertically like a sunfish, as mentioned earlier, but many of the videos have been removed for some reason, so I don't know what's happening with Joe. And from the Joe Johnston sketchbook, he describes the origin of the design of the ship. It's not the burger. That is a myth. There's a great website, link in the description, that explains that's just a myth. But he also talks about the mandibles as being loading arms and says, even though the ship is supposed to be a quote-unquote spice freighter, I didn't want the shape to give any indication of its purpose. It's a big hot rod, pure and simple. Not a hamburger. Then we have the novelization of Star Wars, which was Ghost, written by Alan Dean Foster. There's not much about the Falcon here, except, interestingly, Han says, quote, "It's the ship that made the Kessel Run in less than 12 standard time parts." The description of the ship itself is great and follows soon after an interesting paragraph about spaceships needing a sublight drive to get away from a planet's gravity well and then kicking into superlight travel once clear. Quote, "That battered ellipsoid, which could only loosely be labeled a ship, appeared to have been pieced together out of old hull fragments and components discarded as unusable by other craft. The wonder of it," Luke mused, was that the thing actually held its shape. Trying to picture this vehicle as spaceworthy would have caused him to collapse in hysteria, were the situation not so serious. Next we have Brian Daly's Han Solo trilogy. I have a real soft spot and admiration for the Brian Daly Han Solo books. They came out right after Star Wars, when all we knew about Solo was what we saw on screen. The holiday special and the Marvel comic books were fun but weird in their own special ways, and don't have any bearing on my YT 1300 projects. The only other book at the time, apart from activity books, storybooks, cookbooks, the novelization, was Splinter of the Mind's Eye by Alan Dean Foster, the cover of which implied one hell of a mysterious and amazing story, but it wasn't that great. Han Solo didn't appear because Harrison Ford only signed up for one film, and we're very lucky Star Wars was a hit, since this would have been the low-budget sequel instead of The Empire Strikes Back. The best thing about this book is the Ralph McQuarrie cover illustration. Additionally, there were 3 Lando Calrissian books by L. Neil Smith that all came out in 1983. I read them recently, and they're very weird, and the Falcon on the cover looks very weird. It looks like it might have been based on the Kenner toy. It's really thick. But it isn't just that Daly's books were, aside from the comics, the first expanded universe Star Wars materials produced. They actually capture Solo and Chewie's characters quite well, and the books did something it seems none other since has been able to do. Avoid making constant references to things, or bringing back characters and or locations seen on screen in the Star Wars movies. There are a few references to the Empire, and at least one Clone Wars mention, but these are otherwise wonderfully standalone stories set in an undefined period of time before the events in Star Wars. The books have no tedious or cheeky eye-rolling explanations of the few things we know about Han Solo, Chewbacca, and the Millennium Falcon. No unnecessary and obsessive connecting the dots, just adventures. I'm sure Daly had restrictions imposed on him about how much of the Star Wars universe he could mention and how much he could develop Han and Chewie's characters beyond portraying them regarding the ship as extremely competent mechanics. But the books are stronger for leaving out most of the known Star Wars universe and keeping the characters' histories somewhat mysterious. This avoidance of known materials in favor of creating new elements serves to make the galaxy a bigger place, whereas constantly making references, revisiting locations and characters serves to make the galaxy smaller. These really do seem like adventures Han and Chewie would have had prior to meeting Luke and Ben on Tatooine. Much of what Daly reveals about the Falcon simply underscores what Solo said in Star Wars about his special modifications. And it's for those reasons why I'm taking the Daly books seriously as far as research is concerned. And that's about 98% of the research I used for my factory stock Millennium Falcon build. The other 2% would be a resource here or there, something I have invented or had to do just because of my modeling limitations. I hope I didn't put you too far into the weeds. I hope I made this at least a little bit entertaining or informative. There's a lot of great websites and videos out there that are better than this, better made than this, but this is the document if anybody had any questions about why I made my factory stock Millennium Falcon the way I made it. This is the information that informed that build. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.